Greetings, folks. This is Clarence A. Mason, better known as Mason Weaver. I'm a past member of the Blacks for Trump's Board of Advisors, and I want to talk to President Trump today. Um, we tend to run from liberals. We tend to apologize to liberals. We try to make liberals be less scared of us. And, President Trump, you became President Trump because you were bold. And I'm noticing that you're beginning to cater to the moderate parts of your party, and we got to talk about that. Juneteenth, you're counseling a rally because it offends the liberal Democrats, because Juneteenth is the date you had your rally scheduled, and Juneteenth is the day that black folks celebrated the end of slavery by Republicans. You're stopping a rally. This is a perfect time, Mr. President, for you to stand up and explain to the public what Juneteenth was and who the Republicans was. It's time for you to stand up and say, this is celebrating a Republican victory over slavery. This is a Republican victory over the Democrats who want to keep slavery. It's a perfect time for you to stand out in a national audience and say, we're going to celebrate what Republicans have always stood for: freedom. What the party was founded over: freedom. What the party went to: freedom. The Juneteenth celebration has been hijacked, as everything else has, by the liberal Democrats by trying to change history. They want you to believe that it was 2 years after President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, those slaves in the South were still slaves. That Lincoln somehow was responsible for them still staying slaves 2 years after. They want you to believe that the Emancipation Proclamation was a document that ended slavery. But it wasn't. The executive order called the Emancipation Proclamation was an order allowing the Union to fight to end slavery against the Democrats who are fighting to keep slavery, and that Emancipation Proclamation freed those slaves in states that were not under the Union control. That was like if President Trump, Mr. President, that's like if you tried to free the prisoners in Mexico City. You couldn't free the prisoners in Mexico City because it wasn't your country. You would have to send the 101st Airborne, led by the 1st Cavalry, into Mexico to free the prisoners. So Lincoln had to send, to enforce his executive order called the Emancipation Proclamation, he had to send troops into the South to free slaves. Slaves were free under Republican leadership. Slaves were free under the Republican Army that marched into the South, destroyed Atlanta, and marched on Richmond, and forced Lee at Gettysburg to surrender. That was a Republican Army against a Democrat Army. A great time in history, Mr. President, for you to proclaim that and explain that. It was the Republican Army that freed slaves. It was the Democrat Army that enslaved black folks. And still the Democrats today are enslaving black people. The Democratic Party kept black folks slaves. The Democrat Army ensured slavery for black people. It guaranteed slavery. So that Juneteenth celebration, those slaves were not free, Mr. President, until the Republican Army showed up. It was a Republican Army whose presence they're celebrating. They're celebrating the fact that your party arrived in Texas and freed them from the tyranny of the Democrat Army. So, Mr. President, take the time. I mean, you change your schedule, but please address this in the next public statement. This is the celebrating of the character, the culture of the Republican Party, the party that got tired of compromising with Democrats on slavery, one free state, one slave state. The party that got tired of lynching and murders and beatings and rape of black people. The party that organized the Underground Railroad. The party that supported Frederick Douglass and Harriet Beecher Stowe ending slavery. The party of John Brown. The party of Harriet Beecher Stowe. The party of freedom. That's who we are. 9 planks of our platform. The original platform of the Republican Party, 6 of those 9 planks address slavery. You told the nation, Republicans, that if you give us this government, we're going to free the people. The Republican Party, Abraham Lincoln stated over and over again, if you give us power, this new fledgling party, You give us power, we will give you freedom. You give us power, we'll stop this compromising. And today, Democrats are constantly calling for us to compromise. And Mr. President, you stood up in 2016. You said, I'm done compromising. You said, if you give me this power, if you elect me, I'm going to end this tyranny of China taking our trade. You said you're going to end black folks in prison. You're going to build that doggone wall. You're going to lower our taxes. You're going to reduce our regulations. And you did that, and your boldness made you the best president anyone has had in my lifetime. Therefore, Mr. President, please don't let this opportunity go past. Address these clowns on Juneteenth. Tell them what Juneteenth was. How can you dare celebrate? How can black people dare celebrate with Democrats, the party of the KKK? How can we celebrate? It's us. It's our freedom we fought for. 360,000 white Republicans went to war to fight their brothers, to free strangers. That's the story, Mr. President, of Juneteenth. Now, one more thing before I leave. That's history. Let's talk about future, right now, today. We got this fear. See, all the Democrats could ever do is bring fear. So now they're chanting, we're going to defund the police. Boy, that brings up no police. And all these liberal Democratic cities, like Seattle, giving up 6 blocks of their territory and calling the terrorist heroes patriotic. These are all Democratic districts. Now, Mr. President, we know, and I know that you know, that if you defund the police, that the county sheriff's going to walk in. It will never be no police in our cities. It will never be no police in our communities. We've had communities go bankrupt and fire the police departments many times. And when they close up, the county sheriff comes in. We should be calm. We should be laughing at these children. Instead, we're reacting in fear. It is not Christian. It is not Republican. Mr. President, I support you. I'm aggressive. And sometimes maybe things you cannot do because you're the chief executive. You're the CEO. There's some things that maybe we have to do. Lead the Plantation stands ready, Mr. President, to stand in the gap and proclaim the pure victory of Republicans over tyranny. We're ready to do that for you. We're ready to stand up and argue and debate and push back with lots